I, the Martial Immortal. Keywords of the novel. Dragon Ball's Martial Heavenly Master no pop-ups, Dragon Ball's Martial Heavenly Master TXT Complete Collection Download, Dragon Ball's Martial Heavenly Master Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. Strive for a Familiar Future. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yuji Bo Wutian's consciousness gradually awakened from nothingness. A very thin and faint sound sounded in his ear, as if it came from the very edge of the universe. Then, this sense of distance slowly drew closer and closer in the sound of calls, and finally rushed into his mind, Tian-gu. Tian-gu. Wake up quickly. It's a woman's voice. Wu Tian tried several times and finally opened his eyes. Suddenly, he saw a panicked and crying woman kneeling beside him, while he was lying directly on the ground. He stared straight at the woman's haggard face, his expression expressionless. Everything around him still carries a sense of isolation and unreality. Phantom-like scenes flashed before his eyes, shining with lightning and sparks. These images are divided into 3 parts with vastly different styles, and the flickering speed is incredibly fast, so fast that he cannot even see them carefully, but strangely. These images are all imprinted in his mind one by one. It turns out to be 3 memories. 3 parts of his memory. Tian-gu. Tian-gu. What's wrong with you? The woman anxiously waved her hand in front of Wu Tian as she saw his silly expression. Shut up. Don't make any noise. Suddenly, a deep male voice interrupted the woman's words, with impatience, unease, expectations, and anger in his voice. Wu Tian was puzzled how a person could have such complex emotions at the same time, but soon he was no longer surprised. Because he already knows the environment he is currently in. Master, how's it going? Wu Tian, lying on the ground, blurted out and instinctively exerted force on his waist and abdomen, standing up straight up. But before he could stand firm, he was grabbed by a strong arm and forced to squat down. Do you want to die? He saw bloodshot in his eyes and looked at Wu Tian with hidden anger. He desperately lowered his voice and roared, Master is fighting the great demon king for life and death. Can you be quiet? What's going on with such a loud voice? The great demon king. Wu Tian suddenly woke up. Big demon king Bic. This is the world of the 7 Dragon Ball, and he is no longer the elite ninja Yukibo Wutian, nor the once ordinary earth youth Wu Tian, but Wutian in this world, a young turtle fairy 300 years ago. At this moment, his master, Wu Taidou, is fighting against the Bike Demon King, for the hope of all humanity. Are you still fighting? In the original work, only the phrase, Turtle Immortal, was mentioned, but I didn't expect this battle to be so intense. Wu Tian finally regained consciousness, and the sense of disharmony after soul fusion completely disappeared, no longer having the vague perception he had just had. His eyes became bright and deep. At this moment, the once voyeuristic martial arts enthusiast died, and a new future Earth martial arts god with elite ninja qualities was born. Brother Tian, don't you mind? You suddenly fainted from behind just now, it's so scary. Wu Fangfang asked softly behind Wu Tian, with a worried expression in her eyes. Fangfang, I don't mind. I was too worried about my master just now, and I was in a hurry, so I fainted. Wu Tian also replied in a low voice, while he showed his junior brother He Jian with his eyes that he knew he was wrong. He glanced coldly at the senior brother and carefully poked out half of his head to observe the battle over there. The 3 of them, He Jian, Wu Fangfang, and Wu Tian, are now located behind a giant rock about 200 meters away from the battlefield where Wu Taidou and Bike the Great Demon King fought. Wu Tian carefully used a giant stone to cover his body, slightly protruding his head and looking towards the center of the battlefield 200 meters away. I saw 2 figures, one white and one green, fighting rapidly over there. However, the distance was too far, and it was difficult for Wu Tian and his team to distinguish the specific situation on the battlefield clearly. They could only see the two figures of Bai and Qing occasionally touching each other, engaging in close combat, and then attacking each other with Qigong after bouncing open the opponent. So fast. Wu Tian was secretly startled, looking at the two figures in the distance who were fast and skilled. He struggled to observe and thought to himself, I'm not inferior to those martial arts masters in the village. I don't know which level of strength can I have in the 8th level of Duanjia. Unfortunately, I only learned the secrets of the first 2 levels. I don't know if I can use them in this world. What are the two people fighting at this moment? One is the strongest among humans on Earth today, a martial arts master who has defeated invincible opponents in the world. The other one is also the embodiment of the dark side of the Earth's heavenly gods and a part of the genius Namek people. They are undoubtedly the pinnacle martial artists of this era. No one can intervene in the battle between these two people. Wu Tian tried hard to carefully analyze the situation on the battlefield, but gradually, his eyes changed. A little crimson color emerged from the depths of his eyes, like bright red ink soaking rice paper, finally filling his entire pupils. Shoo, 3 small black jade beads squeezed out from his crimson eyes, forming a strictly symmetrical triangular pattern, slowly rotating around his lacquered black pupils. Something's wrong, Wu Taidou is at a disadvantage. Where is his magic seal wave? In the original work, the Turtle Immortal said that Wu Taidou used the magic seal wave to seal the Bic the second time. The rice cooker is on the ground over there. So, Wu Taidou can't actually find the time to cast the magic seal wave. As far as I know, even if Wu Taidou's combat power is lower than the Bic at this time, he wouldn't be so tired of fighting. Wu Tianyue looked more and more shocked, because he found that the green figure, which is also the Bic, was simply fighting against Wu Taidou in the white martial arts suit. Wu Taidou struggled to support himself, perhaps he was also desperately trying to find a gap and launch a magic sealing wave to completely seal Bic. However, it was obvious that he had already exerted all his strength to resist Bic's attack. How could he still find an opportunity to launch a secret technique under such pressure? Wu Tian furrowed his brow tightly, and a message about the Dragon Ball flashed through his mind. Based on this situation, Wu Taidou will never have the chance to use the magic sealing wave to seal the Bic. In this way, the trend of the Dragon Ball world will move towards a direction that I completely know nothing about. Is it that I am traveling through a parallel world where Wu Taidou has not sealed the Bic? If that's the case, then who should stop Bic? My body, the Turtle Immortal of later generations, will never surpass Wu Taidou's peak state, and I and He Jian will not be able to seal the waves with magic. How can we be Bic's opponents? Are we going to climb the Kailinta Tower and find another Bic in the Temple of the Heavenly Gods? This is not possible. That person may be able to decide to kill Bic in 300 years under guilt, but at this time, the new Heavenly Gods may not be able to. No. Wu Tian was shocked in his heart. He finally realized that he could clearly capture the high-speed battle scene of the two people 200 meters away, and there was still room to analyze the situation. Wu Tian immediately noticed the abnormality in his eyes. This feeling was too familiar. This is the feeling when Sangoyu's Sharingan is opened. Did I travel with a chakra? No, or rather, the me that travels through is essentially a chakra in my original body. Is the soul of a ninja chakraized? Or is it a chakra imprint with memories like Pofengshui Gate and Vortex 9 Sinai? Chakra, spiritual will. He flashed through his mind with lightning and sparks. At this moment, suddenly, the two people fighting over there separated. Wu Taidou seemed to have been heavily hit by Bic, rolling on the ground for more than a dozen times, and suddenly fell to the ground without getting up. At this moment, the extremely tall young Bic was standing in place, seemingly laughing wildly. It's too far away, no one can hear him laughing, but it's not important anymore. what's important is that Wu Taidou has already fallen. Instead of living a life of mediocrity, it's better to strive for a future that I know. He saw his heart burning with anxiety, hiding behind rocks to observe the situation on the battlefield, but could only see the two white and green shadows in the distance, unable to know the combat situation of those two people at all. Until Wu Taidou was knocked down to the ground by Bike, He Jian's heart instantly sank to the bottom. His hands and feet were cold, and he murmured, it's over, everything's over now. At this moment, He Jian's hair was stirred by a gentle breeze, and a figure swiftly swept past him, rushing straight towards the battlefield 200 meters away. 2. Are you not afraid of punishment from the gods in Chapter 2? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. A year ago, a demon named Big Demon King Bike suddenly appeared in the world. He was impervious to knives and fire, and even the emerging firearms and shells could not harm him at all. The great Demon King has a bloodthirsty and evil nature, with an interest in killing and destruction. He kills people like wildfire, spits out flames and lightning with his mouth open, and can easily extinguish everything with a wave of his hand. This demon has no trace of human nature at all. Wherever he passes, there are corpses scattered everywhere, bones piled up like mountains, blood flowing like rivers, and slaughtering villages and cities is only seen as idle. The human world has been shrouded in boundless terror, and fragile civilizations appear vulnerable to such extreme force. In just 1 year, nearly 100 cities of all sizes have been destroyed by this great demon king, and scattered villages and towns have reached hundreds or even thousands, with countless deaths and sacrifices. Looking around, the once civilized land has been devastated after a year. He is invincible in the world. No one can stop it. When Master Wu Taidou failed to face the great demon king for the first time, the former, Wu Tian, and his junior brother He Jian had only this idea in their minds, and the two of them were almost desperate. Half a month later, the injured and missing Master Wu Taidou miraculously returned, not only recovering from his injuries, but also bringing back an electric rice cooker with a seal attached. He said that this time he will completely eliminate the great demon king. This time, Wu Tian, He Jian, and Wu Taidou's daughter Wu Fangfang all followed Wu Taidou. If Wu Taidou wins, they can cheer and celebrate the salvation of humanity on the spot. If Wu Taidou is defeated, then one can imagine. Even if they hide at the ends of the earth, the outcome will ultimately be the same, and all humanity has already finished. Wu Taidou didn't say anything and set off with his daughter and the last two disciples. Wu Tian's figure sprinted rapidly towards the battlefield 200 meters away. Brother Tian. Wu Fangfang lost his composure and shouted, covering his mouth. What? Are you crazy, old pervert? What's the use of you going there, bastard? He Jian immediately knew what had happened, his face extremely ugly, and he gritted his teeth in hatred. This physical fitness is on par with my ninja body in my previous life. And truly deserves to be the true disciple of the world's top martial arts master and the future god of martial arts on earth. At the age of over 30, it is also the prime time for the human body. Although I have not yet practiced Qigong, my physical and external martial arts skills are indeed terrifying. Is this the quality of a warrior in the Dragon Ball world? So how terrifying is the arrogant Bike in front of me? What about the martial arts master who can compare with him? Wu Tian ignored the thoughts of the two behind him and ran wildly, quickly familiarizing himself with his brand new body. Ahead was the towering figure of the great demon king of Bic, staring intently at him. His eyes were crimson, and 3 black jade objects spun rapidly, eventually forming a tangled shape of 2 four-cornered darts. At this moment, he forgot what Mochakra was and the basic theory of ninjutsu illusion. He simply relied on his instincts to construct a simple illusion through his kaleidoscope Sharingan and immediately stored it in his eyes. At the same time, he injected the incessant pupil power of the kaleidoscope Sharingan into this incredibly basic ninjutsu illusion to accumulate. Approaching, Wu Tian turned into a wind and blew into this battlefield that determines the fate of the earth. As soon as he closed his eyes, he could feel the scorching heat emanating from the pupils of both eyes, as well as the sharp pain fainting in his mind. He opened his eyes, his resolute expression never wavered. Bick is very proud, he is really happy and sad today. The happy old thing is really difficult to deal with, and it is the only earthling he has ever encountered that can make him feel tricky. It's much more exciting than everyone fighting. And sadly, last time he didn't kill this old thing, he didn't expect that every few days, this old thing would come and die again. Was it so rare for him to accidentally soften his hands and not be cherished? Why is there still a little shrimp? Suddenly, Bike sensed someone approaching and turned his head to see a young man with short black hair, dressed in the same outfit as the old guy on the ground next to him, running quickly. As a nemesis, his vision was extremely outstanding, so he saw it at a glance. Behind the person rushing towards him, there was a huge rock 200 meters away, hiding from others. 2 people. So he grinned and said, "It's really rushing to die one by one. It's so polite. You all know that the Demon King has killed almost all the people in this area and is feeling a bit bored, so are you queuing up to send it to me to relieve my boredom?" Wu Taidou stood up on the ground and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. He thought that this disciple had gone crazy when he saw himself knocked down, and he rushed out regardless of everything. He shook his head and sighed, confused. Ah. Wu Tian shouted and rushed straight towards Bike, without any organization, throwing a straight punch at Bike's chest and abdomen. It's not that he doesn't want to rush towards his head, but rather that Bike is tall and can't even reach Wu Tian's figure. Bang! Bick remained motionless, allowing Wu Tian's light and soft fists to fall on him. He stood in place like nothing had happened, looking down at Wu Tian and grinning with an extraordinary chill. He showed his sharp teeth and said, "Little guy, you've finished fighting, so now it's time to replace me. Be careful." Wu Taidou shouted loudly from the side. With a casual wave from Bike, his arms seemed to turn into a lightning bolt. The lightning turned into a long whip, which fiercely whipped Wu Tian away in front of him. Wu Tian flew to the ground like a kite with a broken string, rolled around a big circle, and surprisingly approached Wu Taidou's side. Wu Taidou looked at Wu Tian writhing painfully on the ground beside him, his face full of compassion. He taught this disciple all his martial arts, how much weight can he have? How could he not know? At this moment, Wu Tian didn't even have the ability to resist at all in front of the great Demon King. I made him daydream for a moment. A chance. Remember. A sound as delicate as a mosquito or fly sounded in Wu Taidou's ear. What Wu Taidou was extremely surprised. When he suddenly looked, Wu Tian had already passed him by the wrong side and struggled to get up from the ground. At this moment, he swayed as if he could fall at any moment. Bick's casual strike could have caused him such a serious injury, which shows the terrifying nature of this great Demon King. What about the Scion people with combat power of thousands or even tens of thousands, 300 years later? What about Frieza, who dominates the universe and seems to have a combat power of over 100 million? Is the Super Saiyan not an opponent's artificial person? What about the Demon Buo? Wu Tian felt a chill in his heart, his gaze dim. He lowered his head and walked step by step towards Bike. "Old thing, is he your disciple?" "Humph, he's incredibly foolish like you." Bick showed a bloodthirsty smile, and when Wu Tian slowly stepped forward, he kicked Wu Tian in the abdomen. Bang! I didn't kick Fei Wu Tian, but directly kicked him down and stomped on the ground fiercely. Nausea. The bright red blood spurted out from Wu Tian's mouth and nose, appearing extremely tragic and terrifying. Bike teased Wu Tian with his foot soles, rolling them left and right. Every time he moved, Wu Tian would spit out a large mouthful of blood. Bike looked at the pitiful creature under his feet and coldly smiled. Sometimes this Demon King is really. Before he could finish speaking, Wu Tian, whose face was covered in blood and his neck was covered in blood as he stepped on his feet, suddenly laughed. He then forcefully opened his eyes and met the green-skinned nemesis who was looking down at him. He hoarsely shouted at Ku, "Bick! You have done so many evil things, don't you be afraid of angering the gods in the sky. Take action to eliminate you." "What? God?" Bick's heart trembled as he heard these two words that were taboo to him. The next moment, a pair of crimson monster pupils appeared in a daze before his eyes. "Pa!" A hand lightly rested on Bick's shoulder, and Bick looked back incredulously, almost scared out of his wits. "It's him." He actually saw the person he had been afraid of. It's another himself. The person who threw himself into the world like he despised garbage. I saw the heavenly god Bike standing behind him in a white heavenly god robe, looking coldly at his other half, as if looking at an ordinary and humble ant in the mortal world. Phantom. The art of neurotomy. It is one of the relatively simple basic illusions that make the subject see scenes they are afraid of seeing in their heart. Wu Taidou, who was standing beside him, saw that the great demon king Bike was stunned by the roar of his disciple. His heart trembled and he understood that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which his disciple Wu Tian had fought with his life. Once he missed it, it would be impossible to have it again. So the great master of martial arts immediately brought up all the essence, energy, and spirit in his body. He no longer needed to retain the pure essence of his own life, like the surging Yangtze River, pouring out all of it in one go. This desperate method of using qi is actually equivalent to taking one's life as a gift, but this old man has no intention of considering anything else. In order to prevent the sinful demon in front of him, even if it is through fire and water, or even if it is broken to pieces, he has already been determined without hesitation. Day and night on the Kailinta Tower, constantly overdrawing life and longevity, finally developing the magic sealing wave. Isn't it for this moment? Wu Taidou's angry eyes were wide open, and his bloodshot eyes were already red. At this moment, countless unjust and undead souls who had died tragically in the hands of the great demon king stood behind him. Their countless intangible beliefs converged into one place, like a scorching sun hanging high, supporting Wu Taidou's body, which had already run dry from oil and light. Wu Tai's tongue burst with spring thunder, and he let out a thunderous shout. Magic. Sealing. Wave. Chapter 3. The Death of a Grandmaster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The great demon king of Bike was sealed, and the evil demon with blood on his hand finally disappeared and was locked in a small rice cooker. Wu Tian knew that in the next 300 years, this demon king would not be born again. Wu Taidou remained in a downward position with both hands, stiff and trembling uncontrollably. But his old face showed a relieved smile, and with a bang, his short and sturdy body fell straight to the ground. Finally succeeded. Wu Tian lay in the distance, panting lightly, with the mournful and unbelievable roar of Bike in the vortex of the magic seal wave echoing in front of him. It was really like a piercing ghost. So. I guess I've already taken the first step. And next, it's during this gap period of the first 300 years of the plot. Let's see how you handle it. Is it flying to the sky, step by step, ahead of the warriors in the original work, or can it only be reduced to being a dragon like a turtle fairy who fights soy sauce? Let's just watch. Wu Tian raised his hand to cover his eyes, thinking silently in his heart. Relying solely on spiritual power to use the Sharingan illusion, even if it is just a low-level illusion like neurotomy, it makes his mind prick and crack open, forcing him to close the Sharingan. And the 3 fists and 2 kicks of the big demon king caused him excruciating pain all over his body. Fortunately, he developed a strong willpower like steel in the world of ninjas. Ha! He gritted his teeth secretly and wobbled up from the ground. Glancing at the rice cooker on the ground over there, Wu Tian moved step by step towards Wu Taidou lying on the ground. Unfortunately. This is a respected martial arts master. Wu Tian walked up to Wu Taidou, squatted down, and flipped the old man's body over. Before Wu Taidou could completely swallow his breath, he opened his eyes again in Wu Tian's arms. His lips moved, and a hoarse and weak voice squeezed out from between his lips. "Ah Tian." "Master," Wu Tian looked down at the elderly man's extremely weak face and responded with a low voice. Not to mention the plot he knew, just the forbidden move of magic sealing wave was enough to kill this already weak old man. He knew that Wu Taidou couldn't survive, and now it's just a comeback. "You've become a bit different," the old man said, but Wu Tian's heart tightened. Although he has basically fused and digested the memories of the original Wu Tian, it is not wrong to say that he is the original Wu Tian. But after all, it is still his original will that dominates this body today, the ordinary person who has struggled from another Earth to the world of ninjas for more than 20 years. Hearing Wu Taidou say this, I couldn't help feeling a bit unnatural in my heart. After all, the sentence he shouted out loud in order to make the illusion work successfully was somewhat unexpected, because it was something that only someone like him who knew the ins and outs of comparison could say. Illusion, if it can take the opponent's mental vulnerability as the starting point, the success rate and effect will naturally increase significantly. And Big's spiritual weakness is undoubtedly only his other half in the sky. Wu Taidou's turbid eyes stared tightly at Wu Tian, who was looking down at him. His lips trembled for a while, and he hesitated to speak, but finally he didn't speak. The old man chose to remain silent, but Wu Tian instead chose to speak up. Wu Tian pursed his lips, pondered for a moment, and then said, "Master, when I was watching a battle from a distance just now, I saw my master being pushed down by the great demon king step by step. I was extremely anxious in my heart, and in the end, I fainted all of a sudden." As he spoke, his eyes turned crimson, and he actually opened his Sharingan. Wu Tian took a long breath and whispered, "When I woke up, my disciple's eyes had changed to what they are now, and while I was sleeping, I vaguely saw many future scenes. Among them, there was the identity of this bike demon king." The old man in Wu Tian's arms heard these words, and his eyes, which were originally so turbid that they seemed to be about to close, suddenly lit up again. He asked hoarsely, "Are you really so? Are you really so? God of heaven, God of heaven." Scenes flashed through his mind, including Wu Tianfang's roar at the great demon king and a few words from the cat fairy on the Kailinta tower. The old man murmured, "Is this demon related to the gods in the temple?" Even though he knew that at this moment, the mech man who stayed in the temple must be watching here, Wu Tian nodded firmly and said, "Yes." In the picture that the disciples saw, the god who lives in the temple is exactly the same as the big demon Bic. Wu Taidou's already weak breath was clearly in disarray. He coughed twice and blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. "Master." Wu Tian lightly stroked Wu Taidou's chest with his palm. "No need, I'm not good at it. Your injuries are not light either." Wu Taidou lay in Wu Tian's arms, struggling to reach into his belt and pull out a bean. He shook his hand and handed it to Wu Tian. "Ah Tian, eat it." "Master." "You eat it." Wu Tian was obviously surprised when he saw the beans taken out by Wu Taidou, but he firmly refused. He said so sincerely, "It seems you recognize this thing." The old man smiled and said in a mosquito fly-like voice, "In order to come up with a move to subdue this demon, my body is no longer strong, even this immortal being cannot be saved. Ah Tian, you are a person with great fortune. You drank the water of immortality 20 years ago, and today you foresaw the future." Ah Tian obeyed, ate it, and then took your junior brothers and sisters back to the mountain. "Master." Wu Tian's voice was already trembling, his eyes red. This did not refer to his Sharingan, but rather his tears had uncontrollably welled up. His sour emotions were surging in his chest, making him extremely uncomfortable. The last time such emotions appeared was when the kaleidoscope opened its eyes. Ah Tian, do you know that since the birth of the great demon king, I have had a strong desire to fulfill it. I hope to spread our martial arts widely, and I hope that there will be more martial arts practitioners in this world. I hope that everyone can muster the courage to confront and defeat demons like the great demon king, instead of just watching so many people die. In just 1 year, too many people have died. The old man was in Wu Tian's arms, tears streaming down his turbid eyes. Master, rest assured that in the future, powerful warriors will emerge one after another on our planet. They will defeat every enemy who wants to harm the Earth time and time again. They will use their lives to guard the safety of the Earth step by step. They are all your disciples and grandchildren. Wu Tian's tears finally slipped down. Well, that's good, that's good. Wu Taidou's voice became quieter and quieter as he looked into Wu Tian's eyes. His voice was already so weak that Wu Tian had to put his ear to his mouth to hear what he was saying. Although you and your junior brother haven't practiced Qigong yet. But Wanghua Jingtian Palm and Qigong Canon have already been passed on to you too. You too must practice hard and establish your own schools in the future. You have drank the water of immortality together, and life is very long. You must pass on martial arts to as many people as possible. And Fong Fong, Ah Tian. The sound is getting quieter and slower. Wu Tian had already pressed his ear tightly to the old man's lips, but couldn't hear any sound for a while. When he turned his head to look, he realized that the old man had lost his breath at some point. In the unclosed murky eyes of the old man, there seemed to be infinite hope for the future. Holding back the sadness in his heart, Wu Tian closed the old man's eyes and spoke hoarsely, Master, rest assured that I will take good care of Sister Fong Fong. Your martial arts will also be passed down by me. Wu Tian took out the fairy beans from the old man's palm, chewed them twice in his mouth, and then swallowed them directly. Previously, his chest and abdomen were almost collapsed from being stepped on by the great demon king bike, but the moment he ate the fairy beans, his injury had already healed, and his strength had fully recovered at the same time. Wu Tian, however, had no heart to marvel at the magic of Xian Dou. He silently picked up Wu Taidou's body horizontally, and at this moment, Wu Fangfang's mournful voice quickly approached from the side. Dad. Chapter 4. Taidou Mountain. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Wu Fangfang let out a mournful cry and rushed towards Wu Tian. She saw that his old father had already passed away with his eyes closed. Her eyes turned red, and tears streamed down like broken threads. She trembled and stroked Wu Taidou's elderly face. She opened her mouth, but could no longer cry, as if she had become mute. She was truly dying of grief. Fong Fong. Master has already gone. Wu Tian stood in place, holding Wu Taidou's body. Seeing her appearance, he also felt uncomfortable in his heart. He said in a low voice. He, who had merged with the original Wu Tian, naturally inherited his feelings for Wu Taidou and Wu Fangfang. Even in the previous ninja world, he was not a cold-blooded person with an iron heart, otherwise he would not have ended up being tricked by his biological brothers and dying together. Wu Fangfang finally looked at Wu Tian, her beautiful face wet with tears and her eyes red. Master. Did he succeed? Where is the great demon king? He saw that he came a little later than Wu Fangfang, perhaps he was more cautious. He walked over and saw the sleeping Wu Taidou in Wu Tian's arms, and immediately asked. The situation on the battlefield changed rapidly just now, and he was far away from Wu Fangfang, unable to see clearly what had happened. Wu Tian nodded confidently and turned his head to look at the rice cooker on the ground over there, saying, Master has sealed the great demon king into that rice cooker with a secret technique. He can no longer come out and harm the world. Sealed inside here. That's great, that's great. He Jian muttered to himself as he stared at the small rice cooker on the ground. the disappearance of the great demon king is good, but it comes at the cost of his master's life. He Jian feels empty in his heart, like he has lost his spiritual pillar. Although he has a rebellious and cruel temperament, he is just like Wu Tian, treating his master Wu Taidou as if he were a deity and admiring him immensely. He Jian, master used his own life to seal the great demon king inside, so it is our responsibility as brothers to find a place to seal it properly, said Wu Tian. He saw that he seemed to be still in a daze. Upon hearing Wu Tian's words, he was taken aback for a moment and immediately replied. That's nature, that's nature. After a pause, he continued, why not just sink it directly into the depths of the sea? Can someone else pull it up from the bottom of the sea? Sinking into the sea. Wu Fangfang was taken aback. The sea is so deep that if something unexpected happens. Wu Tian was surprised in his heart. It seems that in the original work, the turtle immortal and his companions sank the rice cooker to the bottom of the sea. He shook his head and agreed with Wu Fangfang's statement, saying, no, there is too much pressure in the depths of the sea. If this rice cooker were to be destroyed, wouldn't the great demon king break his seal and create chaos in the world again? I thought to myself, this rice cooker must have the power of Wu Taidou, unaffected by underwater pressure. Otherwise, it would be a bug here. But since we are already in such a real world, talking about bugs is somewhat ridiculous. Well, we can't take risks, we need to find a safer way. So where do you think you should hide it? Why don't you just leave it on our mountain? Crane saw a little annoyed. He had a bad temper already, and he and Wu Tian had been displeased with each other since childhood. Wu Fangfang's eyes turned red with tears. She was a woman who had recently lost her old father and had no idea. I have some ideas, but before that, I still need to bring my master's body back to the mountain before making any plans. Wu Tian thought of the sister he had before being picked up by his master Wu Taidou when he was young and wandering. The crane looked at him suspiciously. Believe me, at least I'm also your senior brother. Go, grab the rice cooker, let's go ahead and search for a forest, find a suitable big tree, and make the master's coffin. It's a long way from Mount Taidou, and the master's body needs to be buried as soon as possible. Wu Tian shook his head and sighed slightly. He couldn't help but snort when he heard Wu Tian put on his senior brother's airs. But seeing that what he said was also reasonable, and now that the master's bones were not cold, he didn't want to argue with this person and vent his anger, so he walked over and picked up the electric rice cooker on the ground with both hands. I only realized that this rice cooker didn't look big, it was surprisingly heavy. Thinking that what was sealed inside was the terrifying Bike Demon King, and that his master was blessed with unparalleled skills, some of his supernatural abilities were indeed deserved. He Jian was not surprised. He held an electric rice cooker in his arms and looked around. The vast wilderness and plain were desolate and desolate. He couldn't help but sigh, Master, in order to save the world, spared no expense in risking his own life. As a result, except for the three of us, no one knew about Master's achievements. Upon hearing these words, Wu Fangfang looked sorrowfully at the old father held by Wu Tian, wiping her tears without saying a word. Master, a great master, there's no need for such a false reputation. Besides, the great demon king has been eliminated, and those who have some abilities should have guessed that it was the master's actions. If they don't know, then it's only because they don't know. Wu Tian shook his head, holding Wu Taidou's body horizontally, and strode away. He Jian patted Wu Fangfang's shoulder, holding a heavy electric rice cooker, and followed Wu Tian. The Temple of Heaven, with two figures standing on the edge, one tall and one short, overlooking the human world. The young and tall white-robed deity withdrew his gaze and murmured to himself, is there really anything to foresee the future? Or is it just an ordinary person? His brow furrowed, and something beyond his understanding appeared. This feeling was truly uncomfortable. The pitch-black Bobo respectfully stood by the heavenly god, speaking calmly, Mr. Bobo thinks that the world is vast and full of wonders. In the long history of Earth, countless strange people and events have also appeared. Even today, there are still some ancient inheritances. Just like in the desert tribe below, there are people who inherit the identity of yin-yang witches. The heavenly god should not be too concerned. Moreover, there are machines in the temple that shuttle time. That machine doesn't shuttle through time. The heavenly god shook his head, and he only realized something after becoming a heavenly god. He pondered for a moment, thinking about how Wu Taidou had secretly used some means and influenced Wu Taidou to develop the magic sealing wave when he had fought against Bike twice before. Although this was also because he was connected to Bike's life, it was impossible to let Bike be killed like this. It was really necessary to act in secret, but he still felt guilty and his conscience was unsettled. Ah! The heavenly god shook his head and sighed lightly, deciding not to disturb the disciple of Wu Taidou. Whether it's foresight for the future or eye strain. Let's observe the person's words and actions before making plans. If he becomes a person of great treachery and evil, he will naturally act mercilessly to erase it from the world. If not, then let him go. Moreover, if this person truly foresaw the future, it may not necessarily be a bad thing for the Earth family. Let's go. The heavenly god turned back with his staff and left the circular edge of the temple. Mr. Bobo followed him back towards the palace, and in the end, two people, one tall and one short, disappeared into a shadow and entered the depths of the palace. The three of them stopped in a forest, and the crane saw a big tree that was surrounded by four people. With full force, it swung out with a palm, and the tree snapped and fell to the ground with a loud bang. Then, Wu Tianyun wielded his palm to form a sword, his entire strength entangled in one place. With a swish, the palm sword was like the wind, as if a sword, axe, and axe were passing by. Soon, he split this big tree into 6 wooden boards of different sizes. Wu Tian and He Jian are the only 2 disciples on the mountain who have received the true transmission of Wu Taidou. They have been practicing martial arts for more than 20 years, and although they have not yet developed true Qigong, their external skills are already extremely profound. It is only common for them to chop trees and make materials. Wu Taidou had already commented on it before his death. With their solid foundation, once they practice Qigong, they will surely enter the realm at lightning speed and travel thousands of miles in a day. Therefore, before the final battle with the Bike Demon King, Wu Taidou imparted 2 unique skills, the amazing Heaven Palm and Qigong Cannon, to these 2 disciples who did not have Qigong. With these 2 martial arts, Wu Tian and He Jian will definitely be able to practice Qigong faster. Wu Tian, together with He Jian and Wu Fangfang, made a wooden coffin out of chopped wooden boards and respectfully invited Wu Taidou's body into the coffin. After 2 days and 2 nights of starry nights, the 3 of them carried their coffins and finally returned to Mount Taidou, where the mountain gate was located. Chapter 5. The Amazing Palm of the World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Boom. A thunderous explosion tore out a white crack in the dimly lit sky. The heavy rain began to fall, wetting the mountain road and causing one foot to step on it, causing it to slip and slip. Be careful. The farmer-like person scolded the young man walking ahead. The road is slippery in the rain, it's not easy to walk, the little one muttered. No matter how slippery it is, you have to go up the mountain and give Master Wu Taidou a stick of incense. The farmer widened his eyes, and his rough hands had already lifted them. As long as this kid retorted, if he didn't say anything, he would definitely go up. I know. Master Wu Taidou defeated the great demon king and saved us. The little one shrank his head, obviously getting beaten up a lot. On this mountain road, there are not only their father and son, but also pedestrians climbing before and after them. Most of them are villagers, farmers, and hunters living at the foot of Mount Taidou. There are also small towns far away where those who have heard of Wu Taidou's deeds come to pay their respects. Master Wu is undoubtedly a great hero. Some people sighed and others sighed lightly. Boom! Thunder echoed again, and the black clouds in the sky shimmered faintly. The rain is also getting heavier. Wu Tian stood with his hands down in a small pavilion on the edge of the cliff, gazing intently at the thunderous lightning on the horizon, silent. At this point, he was already dressed in a white morning robe, with a piece of coarse linen sewn on his shoulder. Wangue Jingtian Palm. Wangue Jingtian Palm. I remember this move was used by a turtle immortal disguised as a dragon in the first martial arts meeting of the world, and it never appeared again. I didn't expect such a mysterious skill to be included. It has been 3 days since he returned to Mount Taidou. During these 3 days, in addition to guarding the morning hall, he has been pondering the 2 unique skills left by Wu Taidou for him and He Jian, which were passed down to him. Naturally, the heavenly shocking palm used by the turtle immortal in the original work. It doesn't matter if he doesn't practice, as soon as he practices and studies, he discovers something that shocked him. What kind of palm technique is Wangue Jing Tian Palm? Recalling the plot of the original work, in the decisive battle between the champion and runner-up of the 21st World First Martial Arts Association, Jackie Chan used this move, wrapping his palms around visible lightning rays and then striking Sun Wukong like a qigong, imprisoning him in mid-air and making him unable to move. Thunderbolt, qigong. How similar is this to the Lei Dun ninjutsu he encountered in his previous life? The principle of Thunder Dun ninjutsu is to first change the thunder attribute properties of the chakra in the body, and then use specific fingerprints to cast the corresponding ninjutsu. And what about Wangue Jingtian Palm? Wu Tian squinted his eyes. He, who had the original memories of Wu Tian, of course remembered every detail explained by Wu Taidou when he taught his unique skills. There is no doubt that the secret of Wangue Jing Tian Palm is how to convert the qigong in his body, also known as qi in the manga, into high-voltage current. Isn't this another form of change in the nature of lightning escape? Wu Tian's eyes were filled with excitement, indicating a great interest. Because if his inference is valid, he can use the changes in the lightning escape properties of chakra that he has mastered in his previous life, as well as the changes in the lightning attribute properties of qigong hidden in Wangue Jing Tian Palm, to derive the secret to changing the properties of other attributes, just like solving a simultaneous equation. In this way, it is also possible to transform various ninjutsu techniques from the world of ninjas and reproduce them in this Dragon Ball world. Think about it, the warriors of the Dragon Ball world in the future will always shout, Lei Che, the art of fireball, spiral hand sword. Wu Tian blinked his eyes, suppressing his mischievous thoughts. He reminded himself that these things may shine brightly in the first part, but in the Dragon Ball Z plot, entering the super thrilling chapter, martial arts skills have become secondary, and energy level is the key to victory. It's absolutely unacceptable to let oneself fall behind and prioritize the bottom line. Wu Tian took a long breath and had completely calmed down. Then, his muscles and bones slowly relaxed, and his arms naturally drooped. Suddenly, he moved his steps, slapped and punched, moving extremely slowly, drawing a trajectory in the air. Immediately afterwards, he kicked his leg into a phantom, as fast as lightning. He moved around in the narrow pavilion like this. Ordinary people may not even be able to distinguish his figure clearly. His speed is too fast, his punching speed is fast, and his footsteps move faster. I can only see a crimson light circulating within that group of figures. That's a kaleidoscope writing will I. We need to master the qi as soon as possible. Wu Tian's martial arts have long been mastered, and now he is not fighting any set of martial arts passed down by Wu Taidou, but rather freely. When you're in high spirits, you'll follow suit with your fists. Arrived, the figure is like the wind. The figure of Wu Tian practicing boxing is getting faster and faster, and his figure is becoming increasingly blurred. The eerie black four-cornered darts in his eyes began to spin. Wu Tian felt a surge of hot air accumulating all over his body, about to burst out. So he closed his left eye and suddenly opened it. A row of black blood and tears slid down the corner of the left eye, with kaleidoscope pupil technique and absolute control of chakra, energy, chi. Crack, as if some cage had been broken inside him, a stream of heat scattered into his limbs in the blink of an eye. This feeling. Wu Tian clenched his fists tightly, feeling the expansion of his power. He really wished he could howl up to the sky. A severe stabbing pain appeared in the mind. Wu Tian paused in his footsteps, and the chaotic figures on the cliff suddenly stopped. Between the extremely fast and slow transitions, there was almost a hallucinatory shadow. Wu Tian pressed his palm on his tightly closed left eye and gritted his teeth. The pattern of the kaleidoscope quietly faded in the right eye. Wu Tian looked at the blood on his left palm with a bitter smile and sighed inwardly. Although the kaleidoscope and pupil technique can still be used, it seems that the side effects are too strong. Thinking of the sharp pain in his mind just now, he couldn't help but shudder. Then he thought, I don't know if I can find a way to cultivate my spirit. I almost forgot the 7 Dragon Ball. I wonder if I can directly ask the Divine Dragon to teach me. And can I solve the hidden danger in my eyes? The more one uses the kaleidoscope the more it is sealed, and in the end. The ending is forever losing its brightness. The only way to survive is to obtain the kaleidoscope Sharingan of one's biological brothers, in order to obtain eternal light. But in this Dragon Ball world, where are his biological brothers still? Not to mention another pair of kaleidoscope writing will eyes. Even if we have to rely on the Divine Dragon, with the current level of Earth's technology 300 years ago, whether we can produce Dragon Ball radar is still a question. Moreover, even if it can be produced, a Dragon Ball is needed as a sample to create a Dragon Ball radar based on the specific wavelength electromagnetic waves emitted by the Dragon Ball. However, the Earth is vast in area, with 7 small beads scattered throughout the world. It is not as difficult to find one by luck as searching for a needle in a haystack. Because the Earth includes all the oceans. Anyway, having developed the chi inside my body is considered the first step, and I have already taken the stage. I can't wait for things to happen in the future. Let's take each step slowly. I also have to follow my master's instructions and establish schools to spread martial arts. That's how the Turtle Immortal Flow and Crane Immortal Flow in the original work came about. Turtle Immortal Flow, I don't want to call that name. Over 300 years. No matter how urgent, we have to live day by day. Wu Tian looked at the horizon from afar and found that the dark clouds had gradually dissipated, revealing a glimmer of bright sunlight. When Wu Tian returned to his master's spiritual hall, the crowd of worshippers were gradually dispersing. Many people recognize him as a disciple of Master Wu Taidou. Even if they cannot recognize him, seeing him dressed in filial piety clothes, they can still tell that he is very close to the late Wu Taidou, so they cannot help but show respect. At that time, a large group of people on the mountain, after the failure of the first battle against the great demon king in Wu Taidou, fled down the mountain and scattered around. Some people witnessed this with their own eyes. As Wu Tian walked towards the spiritual hall, he clenched his fists and thanked the scattered crowd one by one. Their 3 siblings originally intended to have a simple funeral, but did not expect so many people to rush to the mountain to pay their respects. After the crowd left, it was almost dusk. The dim yellow sunset slanted on the courtyard floor, adding a touch of coolness. Wu Tian stepped on the fallen leaves on the ground and walked into the spiritual hall, where Wu Taidou's coffin was placed. Wu Fangfang and He Jian knelt on both sides, dressed in mourning clothes. Wu Fangfang had a mournful expression, her eyes red, but she could no longer cry. He Jian's face was blank and expressionless. Upon seeing Wu Tian return, the 2 of them respectfully kowtowed 3 heads to the coffin and slowly stood up. I'll go make some food. Wu Fangfang lowered her head and whispered softly before leaving. How did you deal with that thing? How did you plan? He Jin glanced at the rice cooker placed in the corner and asked again. Wu Tian looked at his master's coffin lid and said, go find my sister, ask her for divination, and find the most suitable place. This is the most appropriate. Upon hearing this, He Jian raised his eyebrows and said in a tone that was not friendly, your sister. Do you have another sister? Do you have divination? Wu Tian ignored his tone and sighed lightly, I once had an older sister, but when I was taken to the mountain by my master, my sister was also taken away by another person who said she had gone to learn witchcraft with me. After all these years, I don't know where she is now. I don't even know where she is, so you can talk nonsense. Crane Saw was furious, but he didn't dare to make a loud noise. The master's coffin was next to him, and he dared not be reckless. Wu Tiandao said, do you know where master went after his first defeat? Before He Jian could answer, he continued, he went to Kailinta Tower and saw the immortal on the tower. Otherwise, with such a serious injury, how could he recover so quickly? Kailinta. I think I've heard of it before. He Jian frowned. Master, after several years of preparation, said that it was a holy land for martial arts. Wu Tian reminded him and said slowly, we can go there. Please let the immortal on the Kailinta Tower know where my sister is now. Chapter 6. Before descending the mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. For more days later. Brother He Jian, go and retrieve Brother Tian. Didn't you make a plan to bring that thing down the mountain today? Wu Fangfang was cooking breakfast when he saw He Jian dressed in a single suit, practicing his martial arts on the open space in the front yard. Upon receiving the reward, the crane let out a and headed straight towards the mountains. He is not in a good mood. It has been 7 days since he returned, but he has not made any breakthrough in terms of qi. And if we start counting from the master officially passing on his qigong canon, then the time will be even longer. How can he feel comfortable in his heart, who has always been proud and proud? Qigong is the realm that countless martial artists dream of, and there are only a few in the world who can practice qi. In the past few years, the master taught them to lay a solid foundation, and only when they had accumulated enough, did they teach their fellow martial brothers the techniques of qigong. Therefore, He Jian has been listening to his master's arrangements and working together with Wu Tian to endure physical pain for over 20 years. But now, finally standing in front of that gate, he couldn't push it any further. How could he feel comfortable? However, if he is like this, then his lewd senior brother, who is a starving ghost with a lustful expression, must not be able to do it. He must have not been able to vent his anger. I just don't know. If He Jian found out that in the future of over 300 years, there is a little girl named Bidalai who can develop a sense of qi in just a few hours and control herself to float for most of the day. What would he think? He Jian walked along the rugged mountain road with a light chariot, which was a suitable place for practicing martial arts. Their martial brothers were also familiar with only a few places in total, so he quickly discovered Wu Tian's figure on the edge of a cliff. As the morning sun rose, Wu Tian stood on the edge of the cliff. Heat was steaming up and down his body. Under his thin single clothes, he could clearly see sharp and angular muscles tightly arranged, stretching out like flowing water with his body movements. After finishing his morning exercise, Wu Tian regained his momentum and slowly exhaled towards the dawn light emanating from the mountain. The breaths were as long as the waves of the Yangtze River, and lasted for a considerable amount of time. It was truly shocking. He gazed at the hazy morning sun in the distance, suddenly lifting his left palm. A halo suddenly enveloped his palm, and then the halo gathered towards his left palm, gradually breaking away. A white light ball 1/3 the size of a fist appeared on Wu Tian's left palm. The white qigong ball clearly did not have direct contact with Wu Tian's left palm, but it seemed to stick tightly to Wu Tian's palm, moving freely in the air with his hand. The 4-day skill is only enough to achieve this one step. Qigong is just detached from the body, not to mention the world shock palm and qigong cannon. I'm afraid even the turtle sect qigong is far inferior. Wu Tian withdrew his gaze from the distant sunrise and looked at the small ball of light on his left palm. His brow furrowed slightly, indicating that he was not satisfied at all. He murmured to himself, without considering the changes in the nature of thunder in the 10,000 nation shocking heavenly palm. Just in the form of simple qigong, how can we make such a small amount of energy exert greater power? Where is the secret? In the original work, turtle-style qigong has always been a signature skill of Dragon Ball warriors, especially Sun Wukong, which naturally has its uniqueness. And the most prominent feature of this turtle-style qigong. If Wu Tian expected it well, it should be able to exert maximum power with the smallest amount of qi. This is also the realm that Wu Tian has been pursuing so far. He was distressed at the moment, but he didn't know that not far behind him, there was a pair of eyes full of shock. Qi. Is that qi? I can't be wrong, that's just qi. I didn't expect that you, who killed me, had already practiced qi. Can we only rely on the ability of the right eye? Wu Tian furrowed his brow and shook his head. Without saying such nonsense as, you can't rely too much on writing will eyes in the Dragon Ball world, the side effects of using a kaleidoscope to write will eyes alone were enough to make him headache. The kaleidoscope Sharingan is a special eye that only the elites of the Uchiha clan are qualified to open, and each pair of kaleidoscope Sharingan usually has different abilities. For example, in the left eye of Uchiha Itachi, there is a magic spell called Moon Reading, while in the right eye, there is an immortal flame called Heavenly Illumination. One eye of Yuzhibo Jishue is the strongest illusion, other heavenly god, which can completely reverse a person's will, while the other eye has a special power to influence the subconscious of others. Wu Tian's kaleidoscope writing wheel eye, the left eye's ability is absolute control of chakra, while the right eye is the ultimate utilization of chakra. In his past life, he was not such an outstanding person in terms of chakra, and it can even be said that his body's chakra was far below the average level. However, since he opened the kaleidoscope Sharingan, with these two abilities in his eyes, the impact of chakra on him has already been kicked away by him. With the absolute control of chakra, he is able to perfectly grasp every trace of chakra in his body without any escape or waste. Combined with the ability of the other eye, the ultimate utilization of chakra, he is able to unleash ninjutsu with much lower than standard levels of chakra consumption, no less than normal power. Wu Tian casually swung his left palm towards the ground, and the ball of qigong, which was 1/3 the size of a fist, disappeared directly under his feet. Puff, the ground seemed to be burned by flames, and a burnt black appeared. However, in reality, it did not produce much destructive force, and at most, it only lifted a little bit of the ground. It seems like it's just superficial. He hasn't mastered the secret of the 1,000-nation shocking palm at all. Compared to the scene where the master demonstrated that day, this level of technique only adds to his laughter. Wu Tian's face remained unchanged, his eyes tightly closed. He spread his right palm and hummed. A light ball the same size as the qigong ball that had just condensed on his left hand appeared in the palm. Wu Tian's eyes suddenly opened and turned into a pair of four-cornered dart eyes. Blood was scattered throughout his right eye, and a row of dark red blood silently slid down his cheek. He lifted his right palm, and the white ball of light suspended in his palm was facing a random stone a few steps away. Then, he pushed his palm towards the stone and said, "Shoo." The ball of light shot at the random stone like an arrow. With a loud bang, the stones were shattered into pieces. With the same amount of qigong, the previous move only caused a small piece of ground to become burnt black, but this time it was able to directly smash that piece of rock. Wu Tian withdrew his right palm, and his tearful right eye had already closed. He murmured softly, "I'm still a bit unfamiliar with controlling the new energy, qi. I guess it's only about 6 or 7 times as much." Thinking of the scene in his past life when facing crisis in the world of ninjas, Wu Tian would frantically activate his double eyelids and unleash an instant burst of explosive power that was 10 or 20 times greater. Wu Tian sighed silently, his eyes still feeling a bit helpless as he completely removed the blood-red color from them. He silently thought to himself, what's worse, now not only does the crisis of blindness exist, but even the normal use of the Sharingan greatly overdraws my spiritual power. Spiritual power, spiritual power. Even if he had lived and fought in the world of ninjas before, Wu Tian was very unfamiliar with this thing. In his impression, it was something that only the wizards in the novel would touch upon. And now, as a well-retired ninja and active martial artist, I am about to taste the bitter fruit of mental exhaustion. The feeling of headache and mental exhaustion is really unbearable. It seems that one should use the wheel eye, especially the kaleidoscope, with caution. At least before finding a way to obtain the Dragon Ball, Wu Tian took out a black cloth from his pocket and wiped the bloodstain on his right face. His ears moved slightly, and he said calmly without looking back, "Hejian, when did you sneakily watch me practice?" Hejian walked out of the darkness and looked at Wu Tian's back, his face really black and smelly. Chapter 7. Go to Kailinta. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When did you practice venting? He saw a stinky face and asked. Let me introduce this face here. It looks like a very young man's face, about 20 years old, but in fact, he and Wu Tian are both in their 30s, probably because they drank too much water when they were young. Of course, according to the bald turtle in the original work, we can know that the function of not aging may have to be discounted, but longevity is certain, because no normal human on Earth can live for more than 400 years without dying. Not long ago, just 4 days ago, Wu Tian put the black cloth strip into his arms, then turned around and saw Hejian with an unhappy face. He smiled and said, "Why, hasn't the Qigong cannon made any progress yet?" Hejian's face became even more ugly, but he quickly adjusted. He retorted, "Isn't your Wanghua Jingtian palm also motionless?" Wanghua Jingtian palm is Wu Taidou's signature skill in the martial arts world, and of course, Hejian is aware of the thunderous and powerful appearance when the real Wanghua Jingtian palm is used. Yes, master's skills are indeed profound and profound. If you don't pass by, you have to walk step by step. I wouldn't have practiced Qi so quickly without the Wanghua Jingtian palm. I think this is also the intention of master passing on these two moves to us. You also need to quickly use the techniques of the Qigong cannon to excavate the Qi in your body. Wu Tian smiled slightly and walked slowly towards Hejian, saying, "Did Fang Fang ask you to call me? Then let's go." As he spoke, he had already crossed over the stunned Hejian in place. He frowned in frustration behind him, snorted coldly, and followed suit. At the end of AG 462, 2 disciples of Wu Taidou came down the mountain with an electric rice cooker. The rice cooker is sealed with the invincible demon king of this year, Bike. Take care all the way, you must come back safely, Wu Fangfang said with tears in her eyes as she bid farewell to her 2 closest senior brothers at the foot of the mountain. The crane seemed indifferent to the words and looked away with the package on its back. Wu Tian held the package with one hand, which contained an electric rice cooker. He patted Wu Fangfang's head with the other hand and comforted him, "Don't worry about the 2 of us, Fangfang. You're alone on the mountain, take care of yourself." He saw Wu Tian looking at him from behind, raising his eyebrows as if lost in thought. This senior brother, whom he used to despise, seemed to have calmed down quite a bit like a new person after his master's death. Even those lewd and lascivious habits have never been seen. "I don't mind, but you 2 big men are going to have to endure hardship all the way, and you don't even have anyone to cook," Wu Fangfang shook her head and said. "Those who practice martial arts, it's nothing to endure this hardship. Let's set off quickly." Hejian became impatient and turned around before leaving. He is a highly skilled martial artist, and taking big strides is no different from running in the eyes of ordinary people. Wu Fangfang looked at Wu Tian with teary eyes, and Wu Tian sighed slightly in his heart. In the past few days, he and Hejian have carefully searched through Wu Taidou's study several times and finally found some records about Kailinta. That is a notebook of Wu Taidou's martial arts experience. On one page, Taidou roughly records his experience of climbing the martial arts holy land, Kailinta Tower. As for the specific events on the tower, they are not included in the notes. In the deep forest of the southwest Indian plain, the holy land of martial arts, Kailinta, is all the records about the geographical location of Kailinta in Taidou's notes. Fong Fong, wait for us to come back. Wu Tian walked forward and hugged Wu Fong in his arms. After a while, he gently patted her back and turned around and walked away in big strides. Come back safely. Wu Fong shouted loudly, looking at the back of Wu Tian, who had already been far away in the blink of an eye. Seeing him lifting his arm without looking back, tears finally rolled down her face. When catching up with Hejin in front, Wu Tian heard him complain, "What are you dragging around for? Dealing with this troublesome thing earlier is the right thing to do. There's more to this than just one thing." Wu Tian and he rushed side by side. Their foot strength was trained by running up and down the small mountain, with a pair of iron feet sprinting up and down the road like a sprint. What does it mean? He Jian asked as he hurried along. Master left behind a last wish that day, and now I want to tell you what you mean. Wu Tian pondered for a moment and saw that although He Jian was looking ahead, his attention had already shifted to what he wanted to say. He paused and continued, Master sealed the great demon king at that time, and on his deathbed, he told me that he hoped we could both go down the mountain and establish our own schools. Before Wu Tianhua could finish speaking, he was interrupted by He Jian and said, "No way." Wu Tian's expression remained unchanged, and his tone remained calm as he said, "Listen to me finish speaking." He Jian interrupted impatiently and said in a deep voice, "What's so pleasing? Master, you're about to swallow your breath. You believe in some foolish words. Old pervert, don't forget that Master raised us both from a young age and taught us martial arts, like a teacher like a father. I can't establish my own sect." Wu Tian seemed to have not heard his words, walking non-stop on his way, looking at a forest at the end of the horizon in the distance, and slowly said, "Master is such a great hero and great master. How could he take such a narrow concept of one school and one school seriously? His heart is focused on the entire martial arts world. You know, Master is aware of the fact that we drank the water of immortality on the mountain when we were young. So, his family wants us to spread martial arts widely in our long lives, cultivate generations of outstanding martial artists, and spread the seeds of martial arts to every corner. If possible. So that even if the great demon king reappears, it is impossible for such demons to do what they want again, do you think? This is the grand wish made by the master before his death. Do you want to disappoint him? Hejin, what if there is a stronger opponent than this great demon king in the future? Do you rely on us too? Do you really have the confidence to surpass the master? If so, how much can you surpass him?" He picked up the package containing the rice cooker that he had been carrying in his hand, glanced at Hejin's gloomy expression, and then said, "Hejin, you should know that we are the only two disciples who have inherited the martial arts philosophy of our master. It is the best choice for us to spread his martial arts spirit, or do you think there is anyone in this world whose martial arts is better than his master's? Of course not." Hejin snorted and then asked in response, "But can't we just accept apprentices on the mountain? Our martial arts are all taught by our masters, how can we change our family? Staying on Mount Taidou is ultimately just a matter of one family's opinion, and it will be completely branded with the brand of Wu Taidou and the brand of the savior Wu Taidou. After we go out and establish our own doors, that will be 2 new martial arts schools, the seeds of 2 martial arts paths. After 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. Perhaps." He squinted his eyes, as if seeing the figure of the group of Dragon Ball warriors over 300 years later. "I understand what you mean," Hejin frowned fiercely. "I will seriously consider it, but now, let's put the things in your hands first." "That's nature," Wu Tian nodded. "Ahead, the big forest is already in front of us." The two of them walked non-stop, rushing into the shadow of the forest. By the time the two of them emerged from the forest, the sky had gradually darkened. Fortunately, in a forest, they vaguely saw a small village not far ahead. It seems like we can have a hot meal and a decent place to sleep. Wu Tian looked at the flames in the direction of the nearby village and thought, suddenly feeling a sense of instant vision of the West-seeking Buddhist scriptures. His gaze froze, he stopped and raised his hand to stop Hejian beside him. Something's wrong. Is that a thief? Chapter 8. Killer Peach 3000. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What would a martial arts practitioner do if they encounter bandits who invade the towns of ordinary people? Don't even think about it. The twilight had darkened, and two figures swooshed down like falling leaves, sweeping across the flat ground and rushing towards the small town not far ahead. The mayor of Pomegranate Town knelt down on the ground, trembling all over and looking at the person sitting in front of him with great fear. What are you looking at, old man? The bandit leader on horseback had a scar on his face and glared fiercely at the mayor kneeling on the ground. His glare almost scared out the soul of the small town mayor. The group of elderly, weak, women, children, and young children kneeling behind the mayor also fell silent, afraid to take a breath. Most of the young men in the town joined the army during the chaos caused by the great demon king of Bike. Probably all of them have died. The bandit leader pulled out his long sword and intentionally wiped it against his pants legs. He snorted coldly and said, "Today, I ran into our brothers, so it's not your luck. Hurry up. Give me all the money and food I have. Besides. Actually, we're not lucky to escape here," muttered someone in a low voice among the group of bandits riding horses behind the bandit leader. The bandit leader immediately turned his head and glared at the chubby guy in the queue. "Don't talk too much to me. You idiot." The silly guy was not satisfied and said, "That's it. If it weren't for encountering that powerful assassin, how could we have changed our route to such a poor town?" Well. He had intended to continue, but when he saw the boss's increasingly unfriendly gaze and his companions on horseback desperately winking at him, even the most silly one would have stopped talking. The bandit leader felt depressed in his heart and continued to speak with a fierce expression on his face. "Besides, it seems that your village is not very young, and there are quite a few girls and women. 20 girls, our brothers will take them." The town residents kneeling on the ground were in a panic. "No way. Sir." The old mayor's eyes became urgent upon hearing this, but the next second, a chilly steel knife had already fallen on his neck. The bandit leader sneered and said, "Just one more word. I want to cut people with this knife." "No, this." The old mayor's lips trembled. The bandit leader's eyes flickered with a cold light, and he gritted his teeth in a ferocious manner. The steel knife left the mayor's neck and suddenly cut it down. "Who?" A gust of wind blew past the bandit leader, and then he found that the knife in his hand couldn't fall down. A person who appeared from somewhere blocked his steel knife, grabbed the white blade with both hands, and pressed it tightly into his palms. "Damn it, this is another martial arts practitioner, right?" The bandit leader looked at the young man with a stern gaze under the knife, Wu Tian, who looked 20 years old but was actually 31 years old. At that time, he felt his hands were a bit weak. "I really want to cry without tears." Originally, their plan for today was to plunder a wealthier town on the other end of the forest, but accidentally encountered a super expert in the forest. As for why could he know that person is a super expert and immediately turn his head and run? If you come across a person with this big kill written on their clothes and stand still, 7 people in your team will die. Can't you run? Do you think he is a super expert? Now, even if you want to chop someone down, there are experts to stop you. Give you 10 breaths, get out of this town quickly. Wu Tian was in the world of ninjas in his past life. Although he didn't feed all his conscience to the dog, he was still killing people like wildfire. The killing intent and evil energy accumulated in his soul. It's scary, this person is scary. The bandit leader knew he had fallen again. The horses under the bandits sensed the cold breath emanating from Wu Tian and became uneasy, moving their hooves in fear. Wu Tian held a steel knife in his palms and suddenly exerted force from his waist and hips. The force was transmitted layer by layer to his arms and fingertips, and his palms twisted vigorously like rubbing paper. Collapse. Surprisingly, the steel knife was cut off by his pair of flesh palms. The bandit leader widened his eyes and then saw Wu Tian's dual palms transform into a phantom, collapsing and collapsing. 5 consecutive crisp noises, and the remaining half of the steel knife was also shattered and fell to the ground. There is only a handle left. Get out of here now, Wu Tian impatiently raised his palm. Hurry up. The silly and chubby guy among the thieves let out a strange cry, turned his horse's head and walked back, only to see someone walking towards the entrance behind them. That person was dressed in the same attire as the person who broke the steel knife just now, carrying a bundle on his back and a ball-like package in his hand. He Jian's face was written with, "Don't provoke me," and he walked slowly into the small town, allowing bandits to ride horses past him. Wu Tian smiled and said, "I thought you would kill them there." He Jian snorted and glanced at the townspeople who had already stood up. He looked at his fellow disciples with fear and said straightforwardly, "I'll go to the forest later and get the results of those people. It'll just be our meal and accommodation money. How about that?" The old mayor looked at the pairs of eyes behind him, swallowed his saliva, and carefully said, "The 2 gentlemen want to." "Don't worry, the elderly. The 2 of us are disciples from Mount Taidou in the east," Wu Tian smiled. "Are you 2 disciples of Master Wu Taidou?" The mayor's eyes clearly lit up. "Humph, continue." He Jian threw the package in his hand and the bundle on his back to Wu Tian, then turned around and strode towards the Black Forest. "There are so many of them," someone in the crowd said anxiously. Wu Tian had a package of rice cookers in one hand and a package of He Jian in the other, carrying his own package on his body. He smiled at the words and said, "It's just a group of rabble, nothing can be done." When Wu Taidou taught them martial arts on the mountain, he often sent his disciples down the mountain to punish evil and promote good, and kill bandits. He was basically not unfamiliar. He and He Jian were the only disciples who could fight a group of bandits alone. He Jian remembered the direction in which the group of bandits had fled, and with all his strength, he quickly found traces of horses trotting through the forest. But soon, it's not just the footprints of horse hooves. There are also bloodstains. The crane stopped and a smell of blood seeped into his nose. He frowned and hid behind a big tree. Probe around to observe, then move forward, and then hide behind another big tree. Quickly, he discovered corpses. It was the bodies of those bandits just now. "My throat is crushed. My left chest is pierced. There is a blood hole in my temple." He Jian frowned and understood that the group of thieves seemed to have encountered a skilled expert. He is a master who can kill with just one strike. He doesn't need a second move to kill, and his moves are ruthless. Killing is extremely efficient. Bang! The bandit leader collapsed weakly to the ground, and before his consciousness dissipated, he seemed to hear the super killer saying, "Since he ran away, how did he turn back? How did we know that you also changed direction, Grandpa?" He shouted in his heart unwillingly, but the darkness drowned out his consciousness. Suddenly, I remembered that before the appearance of the great demon king, I had been working honestly in the fields of my hometown. I wanted to eat the noodles made by my mother. Tao Sanxian stood in place, raised his eyebrows, seeming to mutter to himself, "Oh. Is there still a living body?" He turned around, revealing a large, kill character on his left chest, and also saw a young man looking at him expressionless. "You are so young that you have such strength, really." Tao Sanxian shook his head and sighed, "I can't help but want to kill you." Chapter 9. Imperial Gasification Gas. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Killer. He saw the word kill written on Tao Sanxian's chest clothes at a glance, and also saw the bloodstain on the person's left abdomen. Are you injured? He Jian guessed. Tao Sanxian took a step and walked towards He Jian. The crane instinctively raised its hand as if facing a great enemy, its face darkened, its attention highly focused, and its eyes fixed on every tiny move of the dangerous assassin in front of it. His master Wu Taidou had once told them before his death that even if he blinked a little more, he could be killed when facing the most brilliant assassin in the world. He dare not be careless even for a moment, this person puts a lot of pressure on him. Chi the crane saw its footsteps move and sweat on its forehead. His muscles were tightly stretched all over his body, and his footsteps were stepping on the muddy ground. Although he stepped heavily, there was a sense of relaxation that could be bounced up at any time. His whole body was like a big bow full of strings, and any slight movement would quickly shoot out. While He Jian was paying close attention to Tao Sanxian was also observing He Jian. The opponent's appearance as if facing a big enemy did not surprise Tao Sanxian, which is a natural thing. Just as he reached the sixth step, Tao Sanxian suddenly stopped and said thoughtfully, "Young man. Are you a disciple of Wu Taidou?" He asked a question, but it was more like telling the crane that he had already seen the message, in a very plain, casual, and affirmative tone. He squinted his eyes and didn't deny, "Do you recognize my master?" Tao Sanxian smiled slightly and said, "Everyone in the martial arts world praises him as the #1 person in the world. Master Wu Taidou, who knows, who doesn't know?" He couldn't help but grin, seemingly disdainful. He saw his eyebrows tremble and recognized the mockery in Tao Sanxian's tone. Tao Sanxian continued, "I might as well tell you that the 3,000 people I want to kill in my life were once planned to be your master." Humph, arrogant. Crane's face turned green and white. Saying this to his master in front of his disciple is no different from cursing your ancestors for 18 generations. He Jian was furious in his heart, but he wanted to force himself to calm down. Tao Sanxian stood there casually, waving his hand and saying, "You don't have to be so nervous. What identity am I? Will I sneak an attack on you? Although I am a killer, I deserve to be assassinated with the method of a killer, at least at the level of your master Wu Taidou. Although after the appearance of the great Demon King, I changed the 3,000 people to this Demon King, but your master is also worth it for me to put him in the 29th place. Stop talking nonsense." He saw that his face turned red with anger. The assassin in front of him, who had emerged from somewhere, although his strength was decent, shamelessly pointed the way to the country, as if some great demon king or martial arts expert were insignificant in his eyes. He couldn't bear it any more and roared angrily. The corners of Tao Sanxian's mouth slowly curled up. He saw his pupils contracting, and his entire body was covered in cold hair that exploded in an instant, causing his scalp to tingle. He tried his best to roll aside. A dazzling white light flashed through the corner of his eye, leaving a trail on his retina. With a loud bang, Crane saw a sound coming from behind, but how dare he look back? He quickly rolled up from the ground and saw that Tao Sanxian was slowly lowering. At some point, he lifted his right hand all the way up. Hiss. Pain suddenly arrived, and it was only then that he realized that his left forearm had been injured by something. Judging from the appearance of the wound, it looked more like a burn, and the tear on his clothes and the wound were bloodshot. Qigong. He Jian gritted his teeth. What an accident. Can you actually dodge my blow? Tao Sanxian was really surprised. He deliberately used words to create opportunities, but was unexpectedly dodged by He Jian at the critical moment. Do you still want to be compared to my master at your level? He Jian covered the wound on his left arm and sneered at Tao Sanxian. When my master defeated the great demon king with his life, where did all of you old people who have the ability to go to the battlefield go? Did Wu Tai fight to death? Did he defeat the great demon king? Tao Sanxian frowned and felt surprised. Humph. Seeing disdainful words, the crane suddenly rushed forward at an incredibly fast speed, only taking the throat of Peach 3000. Tao Sanqian sneered and casually stopped Hejian from piercing his throat with his claws, without looking. With the other hand, he grabbed down and pinched the other fist that Hejian had used to attack his left abdominal wound. Even if I'm injured, you're not enough to take my life. He exerted force on his hands and squeezed both of Hejian's hands until they creaked. He saw the veins on his forehead jump and lifted his knee to bump into Tao Sanqian's crotch. Bang! Tao Sanqian's iron-struck knee collided with Hejian's knee. Tao Sanqian exerted a twisting force on his knee, and suddenly Hejian's entire body collapsed uncontrollably. Tao Sanqian used the leg that lifted his knee to kick Hejian's chest and abdomen with force. Bang! The crane flew backwards in mid-air. Die! Tao Sanqian once again raised his right hand towards Hejian, and pointed his index finger at Hejian as he was flying backwards. Buzz, white light shines on the fingers. Shoo! A wave of qigong light shot through his fingers, like a long spear, towards the crane still in the air. Time seems to have slowed down. Hejian slowly lifted his head in mid-air, his eyes slowly widened, and the white dots reflected in his pupils grew larger and brighter. A black shadow passed by. Boom! The light waves swept through the air, piercing through a large tree in the back, and a white smoke rose from the scorched black hole. Wu Tian lowered Hejian to the ground and calmly looked at the mysterious assassin over there, who was Tao Sanqian. He thought to himself, cave waves. Isn't this the move of Crane Immortal Flow? This person's attire seems a bit like Peach White. Is Peach White not the younger brother of the Crane Immortal as mentioned in the original work, but has any connection with the person in front of him? Is Dong Dongbo also from this person? In an instant, the thoughts in my mind went around. Another one. Also a disciple of Wu Taidou. Tao Sanqian said strangely, but his heart was extremely alert. This seemingly very young guy was able to suddenly break into his battle. This did not stop him from having a murderous heart. Who are you? Tao Bai Bai. Wu Tian asked coldly, deliberately using Tao Bai Bai's name. Peach White. Peach Blossom Kill has never had such a person. Old Man Peach 3000, he was born to kill 3000. And you too will soon become two of these 3000 people. Peach 3000 narrowed his eyes and a cold light flickered. Is it a killer organization? Tao Bai Bai is a descendant of the plot era. Wu Tianqin said, once he received the intelligence he wanted, he stopped answering. At this time, he still retains the habit of his previous life on the ninja battlefield. When entering battle, unless necessary, he never says more than half a word. All his actions are aimed at taking the lives of his opponents and enemies faster and better. The person in front of him feels very dangerous. So, Wu Tian plans to directly exert all his strength and make sure to kill with one strike. Be careful. Although he was injured, he is still very scary. Hejian had already climbed up from the ground and wiped the blood off his chin. Wu Tian remained silent, his body's center of gravity sinking, and there was no emotion in his cold eyes. 8 gates of escaping armor. First gate, liberate the brain, suppress, and learn go. In an instant, Hejian and Tao Sanqian, who were present, lost Wu Tian's figure in their eyes. Whoosh! 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 Only a black shadow was moving around like lightning. Tao Sanqian's face immediately darkened, and the young man's speed seemed somewhat beyond reason. He didn't know that Wu Tian used the unique skill of 8 gates escaping armor, in the ninja world, which is a peerless forbidden technique that can give people the same power as rebirth from nirvana. Undoubtedly, the bodies of people in Dragon Ball world are different from those in ninja world. There are no back 7 doors like chakra locks in their bodies, but this first door opens is universal. The function of opening the door is to completely liberate the brain from suppressing the utilization of physical strength, even if the activated force causes a greater burden on the body, even if it leads to disability or death. Therefore, the first door opening is actually the soul of the entire 8 gates Dunjia. Whoosh, Tao Sanqian became completely serious, mobilizing his internal energy. When acting as a killer, he pursued hiding his own breath until it was gone. But at this moment, facing the enemy head-on, especially a big enemy like Wu Tian who puts pressure on him, he has to completely unleash his entire aura, don't wander around. This kind of little trick. In Tao Sanqian's eyes, the figure of Wu Tian moving at high speed around gradually became clear. With the habit of his eyes, he also grasped Wu Tian's movements more and more clearly. But kaleidoscope writing will I. Complete control of qi. Control qi. The extreme utilization of gas. Transforming gas. Shu. Wu Tian once again broke away from Tao Sanqian's sight. Like a lightning bolt, suddenly disappearing. A white light is reflected in Tao Sanqian's enlarged pupils. 10, Chapter 10. Seizing ships and going to sea. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Whether it's the one pass hand of the 3 generations of Thunder Shadow, Kakashi's Ray Cut, or Sun Wukong's Heaven and Earth Through Waves. Overall, whether strong or weak, they can all be classified as the same form of attack. Spike. Utilizing the tremendous kinetic energy generated by high-speed movement, and then strengthening the attacking area with super energy, the final result is unparalleled explosive power, piercing through the target with one strike. Tao Sanqian looked down incredulously and saw the hand piercing through his chest. The muscles were tangled like iron stones, tightly arranged, and each green muscle swelled as if tearing the skin of the arm, even beating faintly, indicating how terrifying the load on Wu Tian's heart was at that moment. A faint white light enveloped this steel arm, and Tao Sanqian could certainly feel how pure this qi was. I also know how strong the air condensed on the claw that penetrated his back was. All the qi condensed on the claws, reaching its maximum intensity. As it moved at a super high speed, a single blow pierced through itself. This is homicide. This young man is not like a disciple of a martial arts master like Wu Taidou, but instead has the style of a top-notch assassin and assassin like himself. Cough. A big mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth, covering his collar and staining Wu Tian's arm and his chest until it turned red. Tao Sanqian stared at Wu Tian's expressionless face with crimson eyes and said eerily, "Good kid, what's your name?" Wu Tian gave him a faint glance, but did not answer. He pursed his lips and held on to Tao Sanqian's shoulder with the other hand, forcefully pulling out the arm that pierced through the person's chest. Pucci, another large pool of blood surged wildly, and Tao Sanqian's whole body twitched, her face instantly turning pale. Wu Tian turned around and Tao Sanqian knelt down behind him with a thud, his eyes filled with anger and hatred. How could he not hate? He was determined to kill 3,000 people under the name of 3,000, in order to achieve his own path as an assassin. Today, at the cost of his left abdominal injury, he finally solved his 2,159th goal, but how could he have thought that he would inexplicably die in this remote and desolate forest? Dead in the hands of 2 guys I've never seen before, no, a little kid. Tao Sanqian felt powerless all over, his eyes turning black, and he slowly fell forward. Throughout the process, the crane never closed its mouth as it grew up. He was stunned as he looked from beginning to end. He had thought that even with Wu Tian's help, there would definitely be a big battle to be fought, but how could he have expected that after Wu Tian arrived, he would start fighting without saying a word, 3 strikes and 5 strikes, and cleanly stabbed the killer who appeared to be very powerful. When did Wu Tian become so powerful? How could his speed be so incredible? Can there be such a big leap after practicing qi? He hasn't even mastered the 1,000-nation shocking palm yet. It's just the explosive power of the master. That's all. This conjecture made he shudder at the sight, as he watched Wu Tian slowly approaching, as if he was looking at a monster. It must be because my skills are too shallow that I cannot compare him with my master, He Jian thought to himself, his face uncertain. He didn't know. At this moment, although Wu Tian looked relaxed and freehand, his muscles were actually filled with tearing pain. The first door of the 8 gates escaping armor is opened, and after fully exerting oneself, it completely disregards the consequences of squeezing physical strength. This side effect is not a joke. Suddenly, Wu Tian's heart twitched. The pain on his body actually reminded him of something. Will Sun Wukong's Jiwang fist be similar to the principle of the 8 gates Duanjia? When Sun Wukong fought against Vegeta in the original work, he used 3x, 4x, and 5x World King fists, and his whole body would be in excruciating pain. Outsiders would scream incessantly when they touched him. Isn't this very similar to Shaoli and Akai, who opened the 8 gates? Duanjia Hejian pointed to Tao Sanxian lying on the ground next to Empress Wu and said, "What should I do with this person?" Because of Wu Tian's great power, he unconsciously began to seek Wu Tian's opinion, which was impossible in the past. Forget it, he can't live anymore. Wu Tian shook his head, pressed his mind, endured the excruciating pain, crossed Hejian, and walked back along the way he had come. Hejian stayed in place for a while, then turned around and quickly followed. After walking for a while, Wu Tian stopped under a big tree and looked up at something on the tree, frowning silently. The crane instinctively tensed all over and asked in a deep voice, "Has anyone come again?" Wu Tian looked at him strangely and shook his head, saying, "No, it's not." After a pause, he remained honest and said, "I left the package on the tree. You can go up and take it off." I just confiscated it and it's a bit weak from the fight. Of course, the two of them who had already left would not notice that Tao Sanxian's fingers were moving as he lay on the ground. Of course, it doesn't mean that this person hasn't actually died. With this kind of penetrating injury, an ordinary earthling like him who doesn't have fairy beans or wet nurse dandy is bound to die. Death is death, but before he died, he did his best to leave something behind. That is a note written by special means, rolled into a small tube with a special smell by Tao Sanxian. After he had already suffocated and died, he still tightly held this thin and long paper tube between his fingers. Not long after, a grey little pigeon accompanied the first ray of golden sunlight in the morning, descending from the sky and landing on the head of Tao Sanxian's corpse. It turned its head, bounced and walked to Tao Sanxian's palm, pecked at the thing he was holding between his fingers a few times, and finally caught it in its mouth. The grey dove flapped its wings with a sharp edge and flew away again, not knowing where it had gone. The next morning, all the residents of Shirlu town bid farewell to Wu Tian and He Jian, and the two of them continued their journey with their luggage. They followed a map brought down from the mountain and entered a hilly area. They walked through the wilderness and villages, and the situation they saw was extremely bleak. Ordinary people could only survive in their hometowns, and in some places, they didn't even know the news of the defeat of the great demon king. They still hid in cellars and caves, living a trembling life. The two senior brothers rushed by day and rested in the wilderness at night, taking the sky as their bed and the earth as their feast. When they were hungry, they grabbed 2 wild beasts and killed them. They were thirsty. If they couldn't find a water source, they would have also drank wolf blood. When encountering injustice on the road, such as bandits and mountain bandits, with their unparalleled skills, they naturally take direct action to suppress, kill thieves, bandits, and villains, and distribute all the gold, silver, gemstones, money, and treasures to the nearby village farmers. Therefore, along the way, it has earned a great reputation and praise for Taidou Mountain. Nearly 2 months later, Wu Tian and He Jian finally arrived at the first stop of their trip, the coastal city of West Coast City. The two of them entered the city and saw traffic and people coming and going. Is the level of productivity in the Middle Ages like watching a Sherlock Holmes movie? Wu Tian and He Jian walked side by side on the wide brick and stone streets of West Coast City, looking at the pedestrians on the road and thinking to themselves. This is probably the Western capital of later generations. He has already looked at the map he carries with him countless times, and he has also studied the map of the Dragon Ball world in his previous life several times, so he has a rough impression. Thinking that the genius scientific girl Bulma, who created Dragon Ball radar, gravity chamber, and even time shuttle in the future, was born on this land, he couldn't help but sigh. As for the current era, Wu Tian has walked all the way and no longer hopes to create the Dragon Ball radar. Firstly, the technological level of this world has only just developed to the point where electric power has just begun to be applied, and even electrical appliances have not yet become widespread. Wu Tian suspects that the electric rice cooker they have in their hands was transformed by the cat fairy on Kailinta Tower using their superpowers to give to Wu Taidou. Creating the Dragon Ball radar. Wu Tian doesn't feel much hope. Secondly, he doesn't have ready-made Dragon Balls. Even Bulma needs a Dragon Ball to create radar based on the special electromagnetic waves emitted by the Dragon Balls. And he doesn't have a Dragon Ball in his hand, so he doesn't expect any radar. Fortunately, he doesn't have much else, he just has more time. For over 300 years, let's plan on the Dragon Ball event in the future. Perhaps we can ask his sister's divination mother-in-law to divine the location of the Dragon Ball when we find her. On the coast, at a pier. The old man looked at the horizon, the wind and sun were beautiful, it was a good time to go out to sea. Just as he was about to untie the iron anchor, there was a crisp click, and the iron chain of the ship's anchor unexpectedly broke open. What's going on? The old man was startled and realized that two people were standing on his small boat. Someone had snatched his boat. This is his lifeline. Grab. The old man was about to shout at the top of his throat when a small bundle hit him head-on. He was caught off guard and almost fell to the ground, and his words were all stuffed back into his stomach. He grabbed the package tightly and found that it felt very heavy and something was not right. Opening it, he found pieces of gold, stones, and jewelry inside. The brilliant light almost blinded his old eyes. Forget it, if you grab it, then grab it. The people were coming and going on the dock, and the old man watched his boat getting farther and farther away at sea. He didn't dare to say a word and tightly held the small bundle in his arms.